I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and for the last 6 months or so, I've been running this Toyota LandCruiser Prado 250 series as my everyday drive car. At this point, the vehicle has just under 12,000 kilometers on it, and I'm going to let you know what's been good, what's been bad, and what I think needs to change about the Prado in the future to improve the product. And I'll also give you my tip on which specification you should buy, which will be extra relevant if you live here in Australia. But the other things that I talk about with the Prado should be relevant no matter where you are in the world. Now, the Prado I opted for was a little bit unusual because this is a base GX. It's 72,500 plus on-road costs here in Australia, or about 79 grand drive away, including the midnight alloy paint, which is the only option on this vehicle. Now, I don't think that you should buy the GX. There's another model in the Prado range that makes more sense for most people, but we'll get to that. In this video, we're going to start with the things that went right with this car, the good points. I got 5 of those, 5 bad points about the Prado. I'll then reveal which spec you should buy, and we'll talk about what Toyota needs to improve on this vehicle in future. Before we get started, hit subscribe below. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. For me, the positives actually start with something rather un-four-wheel drive-like, and that is the styling of the Prado. For the last few years, I've thought Toyota has been nailing industrial design of its vehicles, which is odd because Toyota used to make really boring and bland cars, didn't they? I personally think the next generation RAV4 is a good-looking vehicle, but the new Prado looks fantastic. It is an 80 series revival from the late 80s, early 90s. I think the styling suits the times perfectly, and Toyota's been more successful than most at these kinds of retro revivals that don't look sort of weird and twee like a Chrysler PT Cruiser, but instead subtly update an old design and bring it into the 2020s. For me, that is the Prado. Really like the neat lighting front and rear, although of course I wish we got the circular lights for low-end versions that the Americans get. The only problem is if you're going to do a 90s revival, how about some 90s color? The color palette on the Prado is terrible, almost entirely monochrome, apart from the baby blue and the sort of sand color on the altitude and dusty bronze, which is like a brown. I would love to see this vehicle in the big 90s colors, which were navy blue, dark emerald green, dark burgundy. They would look fantastic on this car, I reckon. One of the biggest positives about the Prado has been its relative simplicity with the right level of technology. Now, I'm not a technophobe, and I appreciate that some people like their car to be full of the latest gadgets and gizmos, and that's fine. The Prado isn't at that level, but the technology that it does have is kind of the stuff that you want to be in the car and is helping you. So I like the fact that all models across the range, even this cheapest GX, get the big, clear, crisp 12-inch touchscreen up here with wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, and even a 360-degree camera across the range. Helpful stuff. But then things like your climate control, all button and switch based, volume knob down here, clear physical buttons on the steering wheel. It is a plastic wheel on the GX only, which is a bit of a letdown, although appropriate for most GX buyers. And the cloth seats are actually really lovely, supportive, they feel soft, you can drive in these things all day, and even though you got manual adjustment in the GX, the driving position in the vehicle is good. Things like the speed monitoring, you can have it, it can be audible, but if you want it turned off, it stays off. Things like the lane keep assist actually works well. The adaptive cruise control is intuitive and strong. So really, this car feels like one of the best balances out there in 2025 of having things that help you without distracting and confusing you as you drive. And it also looks cool inside too, don't you reckon? With a big asterisk next to it, one of the positives of the new Prado is the boot, but that only applies to 5-seat versions of the vehicle, which is the GX, the Altitude, or the GXL, which can now be optioned with 5 or 7 seats. Starts with separate opening glass, always a nice feature. You can chuck stuff in without waiting for the tailgate to open. But when you do need more boot space, you won't find a power tailgate on the GX. This is still an old school manual tailgate, which is fine. It's got big, powerful gas struts, so it's not gonna sort of be that difficult to close. It's nice and easy if you're tall enough. But you open up to a boot which is well sized. You do see a hump in the floor here. This is for the 48-volt hybrid system, which doesn't make much of a difference, and we'll talk about that in the negatives. But on the whole, it's a big, square, practical space, no real complaints. If you go to the 7-seat version of the Prado, however, the boot space gets a lot harder to work with, and we'll overlay that on the screen now. Bizarre packaging fail by Toyota for the 7-seat version. A surprise positive of the new Prado, for me at least, is actually its handling. No one buys a Toyota Prado to be a sporty SUV, and it's not a sporty SUV. What it is a distinct improvement on the handling of the previous generation Prado, which was safe as houses to drive, but it had very, very low limits, particularly in the wet. It was slow going point to point on a country road through a combination of limited grip, really slow steering, and pretty poor body control a lot of the time. All of those factors have been worked on for the 250 Series Prado, and it has miles better steering in particular than the old Prado. Almost instant response off center is really rare in any body-on-frame vehicle. Couple that to the fact that grip levels have improved for this vehicle, both in terms of tire grip, it seems, but especially mechanical grip with the move to the TNGA F platform, like the 300 series platform, makes it feel really secure and actually quite capable of tackling country roads at a reasonable clip. I think the ride quality is slightly better than the 150 series, but it's still pretty agricultural. If there was one thing Toyota could definitely improve about this vehicle other than the engine, it would be making it ride with a little bit more suppleness to kind of suit that long distance touring focus of the Prado, because at present the ride is middling, but the handling is nice improvement. A further improvement to the Prado and a positive of this experience has actually been the transmission calibration. While the Prado isn't a fast vehicle, something that is relatively quick is the transmission calibration. We've just got Toyota's Aisin 8-speed torque converter automatic in this vehicle, sort of a good transmission, nothing special, but the software that it runs has been comprehensively changed compared to other manifestations of this automatic in other Toyotas. It shifts much more aggressively, much more quickly. Is that good for the life of the transmission? I don't know. But the point is, it keeps the engine in its peak torque band far more of the time, and it actually creates this sensation that the Prado isn't as slow as it actually is. And if there has been any improvement to its acceleration at any point of the rev range, it'd be because the transmission has been made quicker and is able to harness as much of the engine's performance as it possible at any one time. So that's been quite effective actually. Not as good as a better engine or a premium engine or a V6, but the transmission works well in this car. Now, a downside we have to acknowledge about the new Prado is the price. Yes, I went for the cheapest GX, and at this level, the pricing isn't as difficult to swallow because the core vehicle is pretty capable, and at under 80 grand drive away, you could just about consider it. However, of course, the GX won't suit most families who want things like easy to clean leather or artificial leather seating, and those people will be spending at least mid-80s on the GXL, and from there it just goes upward. You can spend $110,000 drive away on a Prado Kakadu with the same slow 150 kilowatt diesel engine. That is crazy money, is my opinion, but unfortunately buyers appear to completely disagree with me, because not only do I see Prados everywhere in new 250 series form, it is selling very strongly. That's what the data shows. So it appears Prado buyers can afford the new prices. We're not seeing much discounting in the market at this point in time. However, of course, there are rivals out there that can offer better value for money. Let us know what you think down below. Now, while I personally don't do much heavy towing, I haven't hit the caravanning age yet, one thing that does have to be mentioned as a negative of the Prado is that its GVM and GCM are relatively compromised and the curb weight's pretty high. And what that means is that even though we're all set up to tow 3.5 tons here, and that is legal, the remaining payload, if you do need to tow 3.5 tons, is really compromised, 155 kilograms for the GX. So 2 adult men that are not even that heavy and you're on the limit. That is nothing else. That is no front bar, no fridge in the car, no extra fuel, nothing. So that means you have to be really careful with the Prado in order to avoid being overweight. And what it really translates into is that it's a better idea to cap your towing in a vehicle like this at around 2.5 tons, and that's before you get to the fact that the engine performance is pretty anemic when you've got the full weight on the back. In the past, the LandCruiser Prado was always the slightly smaller version of the LandCruiser, and that made it wieldy off-road and also easier to park if your garage isn't enormous. But Toyota have shifted the 250 series Prado to the full-fat LandCruiser platform called TNGA F, that sits under the 300 series, the Lexus LX, the Toyota Tundra, big vehicles. And dimensionally, the Prado is now exactly the same size as the 300 series LandCruiser. It is also much heavier than before. This is a 2.5 ton vehicle. The fact that it received a carryover engine clearly will blunt the performance. That's what we're going to get into next. Unsurprisingly, one of the downsides of the Prado is this. Not only is it quite noisy and lacking in refinement in the powertrain department, but the fact that you can't option a premium engine on the Australian spec Prado means there's no way out of the 150 kilowatt 2.8 litre diesel 4-cylinder if that's not a powertrain that you're interested in. Well, there is a way out, and it's called the Lexus GX, which gets a twin-turbo petrol V6 that is much, much more expensive. Or you could consider things like a 300 series LandCruiser, again, like 40 grand more expensive, or a Nissan Patrol, which is kind of starts in the high 90s here in Australia. But if you like the Prado, you're getting a 4-cylinder diesel for now. Toyota Australia is working on a petrol-electric hybrid version of this car for our market, though its performance also doesn't really light the world on fire. It's definitely quicker, however, because slow acceleration is just a factor in the Prado. You're looking at sort of 10 to 11 seconds best for a 0 to 100 run. Now, this is no sports SUV, and no one's pretending that it is, but for things like overtaking trucks on country roads, you sometimes just find yourself wanting a little bit more performance. Couple that to the fact that the Prado is bigger and heavier than ever, it's just slow going a lot of the time. A negative of the Prado is, in fact, its 48-volt mild hybrid system. Now, not only did no one ask for a mild hybrid on a Prado diesel, it doesn't do much at all to help the performance of the vehicle. Now, we know that Toyota is going to have to do hybrid Prados in future in order to meet Australian emissions regulations. That's fair enough, but the hybrid system in the diesel Prado is so mild that you don't notice it at all. If you back-to-back a 250 series and a 150 series Prado, you will notice the better transmission calibration of the 250 series. That makes a difference. But it's not like you're feeling any electric boost at all. But we still have to deal with the packaging constraints that the hybrid system imposes on reducing boot space in this car. And it adds weight and it adds complexity as well. So given the Prado was sold in Europe for a while without this mild hybrid system, it's unclear why it was completely necessary for Australia, because it doesn't really dent the emissions by much, and it makes the vehicle less useful from a practicality and packaging standpoint. So it's a little bit perplexing. So time to wrap up this long-term verdict of the Toyota LandCruiser Prado 250 series. Would I buy one? Yes, I would actually, but in this specification. Maybe not with the front bar, but the GXL is the right spec of Prado for now in 2025. Running the GX was actually really cool. Sometimes less is more. I love the cloth seats in that vehicle, but it's not the perfect spec for me. I do like a couple of little mod cons, like a leather steering wheel. That said, I don't criticize Toyota for having a basic Prado. The GX is not really intended for private buyers like me. It's intended for mining, farming, dirty jobs where leather is not a plus. However, I do think there is room in the Prado lineup for a more basic variant than the GXL, but one that does have a couple of those conveniences. Maybe it could be a GX Plus, something like that, combining the simplicity of manual cloth seats with maybe a leather wheel, perhaps climate control for the rear seats, kind of like a rough and ready family vehicle for those that don't want leather or pleather. That's just my opinion. More broadly, I would love to see Toyota start to reveal its powertrain strategy for this vehicle, because the diesel, it just ain't good enough at the top of the range. I would never pay 6 figures for this engine in the Prado, and that's what people are paying right now in the Altitude, the VX, and the Kakadu. That's crazy to me. In the old days, I would have said, chuck the V6 in it. But now I realize that's not so easy for Toyota under Australia's strict emissions regulations. So we need to see a hybrid, and I want to see a good competitive hybrid in this vehicle. Why? Because the Chinese are coming. I compared that Prado to the GWM Tank 500 hybrid a couple of months ago. Yes, the Toyota won, but it was close. And the Chinese rivals are just going to get better and better. So we need to see Toyota out on the front foot with this vehicle. I also can't really say the pricing should be cheaper, because people are buying it at the prices Toyota is charging. Would I love to see a cheaper, stripped out, smaller LandCruiser, however? Absolutely. And we think Toyota is working on one of those right now. On the whole though, I've enjoyed the Prado. It's a fit for purpose vehicle. It's not surprising that it sells so well. And for someone like me that's not really a LandCruiser guy, I enjoyed much more about it than I disliked. Keen to know your opinions down below. While you're there, hit subscribe and the notification bell to see more of our long-term reviews. And as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.